Therapists, you've heard me talk before about the importance of getting clear on a professional niche that you can devote your practice to and really dig into in order to develop competencies at a deep level, both for the benefit of your clients, but also for the benefit of your practice. And so from time to time on Love, Happiness, and Success for Therapists, I love having the opportunity to visit with clinicians who have done exactly this because they have such an inspiring and informed perspective. And so today we have the chance to visit with our colleague, Dr. Brenna Hicks. She is a psychologist who specializes in child-centered play therapy. And she's here today to tell us a little bit more about this area of specialization so you understand it and are maybe inspired to learn more about it. So welcome, Dr. Hicks.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Yay. So I'm so curious to know more about this for you. So I wonder if we could start by, if you're willing, just to share a little bit of your own story with us as to how you shaped your career in this direction. I mean, all of us are kind of trained as generalists. You know, you can't go through counseling school without sort of coming out the other side, knowing a little bit about a lot of things. But then typically after graduation is when we really get clear about ourselves and what it is that we love and where we want to develop. And I'm just so curious to hear what your story is related to that.
Sure. It's actually kind of ironic. It's a huge paradigm shift. So we'll enjoy this together.
Okay.
I got my undergrad in a counseling psychology program and thought that I was going to work with the geriatric population, ironically. So I started my master's program fully intending to work with the elderly. And my mom was a medical social worker. She was the clinical director of ALFs and nursing homes, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I spent many summers volunteering with the elderly at her residential homes. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what an incredible opportunity to hear their stories and learn from them and gain their wisdom. And so I was all in on geriatric population. And when I started my master's program, one of the professors at USF would randomly and this was not in play therapy courses. This is just standard master's level coursework. She would randomly say, and when I do play therapy and some of my play therapy clients and my play therapy experience. And so this went on for probably 1 to 2 semesters. And one day after class, I finally went up and I said, what is this play therapy thing that you keep talking about? And I kept waiting for it in grad school, right? I kept thinking, well, if she keeps talking about play therapy, when are we going to talk about play therapy? And I go through theories and I go through intro to counseling and I go through whatever. And I'm like, what is going on? And anyway, long story short, she says, it's a way of being with kids. And I thought, that's interesting. And so I'm like, but you're a professor and you're teaching. And she says, but my private practice work is with kids and I do play therapy. And she was heavily involved in a homeless ministry in the area. And she was involved in disaster relief work. So when the tsunami hit, she was deployed. And when the earthquakes hit, she's deployed. And so the hurricanes come through, she's deployed. So she kind of teases this idea of it's a way of being with kids. And shortly thereafter, I was ready to finish my master's program. And she says, by the way, I'm doing a graduate certificate in play therapy. You should enroll. So it was a 3-semester, year-long exclusive coursework in play therapy.
Oh, wow.
And I went the very first day. I lived an hour from campus and I commuted. So I drove an hour. It was a 4-hour class and then I would drive home. So it was a 6-hour roundabout thing. And I drove, I sat through one class and I got in my car and I had an hour drive home and I called my husband and I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my God. This, you know, when you don't know that you don't know something and then all of a sudden you find out about it and you realize you've needed it your whole life, but you didn't even know. And he was like, whoa, what is going on? And from the moment that I sat through my first class, I was like, this is a paradigm shift for the ages.
Oh.
And then to kind of parallel that story. So I was exposed to it and it resonated so deeply and I fell in love with it so quickly. There was never a turning back for me. However,
Amazing.
here's how this adds on.
Okay.
While I was in grad school, I needed a flexible job. And so I realized that if I substitute taught, I could tell them what days I wanted to work and I could be done by 2 or 3 and then go to class in the evening. So it was a really well-suited job for me when I was in grad school. And I showed up with no jaded perspective. I showed up with no expectation of anything. And I would walk into a classroom and the other teachers, the staff, the principal, the other students, I would start hearing all of the labels. I would start hearing all of the judgment. I would start hearing all of the accusations
Wait, towards you?
toward the kids, the
Towards the
bad kids,
kids.
the
Oh,
bad
okay.
kids.
Okay.
So, oh yeah, that kid goes to the principal's office every single day. Oh yeah, you're gonna send that kid with a referral by second period. Oh yeah, that kid, like, oh my gosh, you're gonna have such a headache with him. That kid, you're gonna have to call his mom by the end of the day. And when you're fresh eyes walking into an environment and you have no expectations, I was so shocked by this. And I just kept thinking, there's no way this kid can ever escape this.
No.
There's expectation. This is self-fulfilling prophecy at its finest. This is Pygmalion effect right in front of me.
Right.
If you tell a kid that they're bad every single day, they have no choice but to be bad. And so I kept this didn't sit right with me. And I kept feeling so uncomfortable with this. And I finally thought, here's the paradigm shift moment on top of me just falling in love with play therapy. I thought, what if we helped kids when they're kids and then they don't need help when they're elderly? And that sealed the deal for me.
Yeah.
I saw these broken kids. I saw these hurting kids. I saw these kids that were misunderstood and misinterpreted. And there were a couple times, this was long before I had any play therapy training whatsoever. And I remember this said child would do whatever. And I would say, come here, please. They'd walk over to me at the desk and I'd say, I'm pretty sure you know. And this is not child-centered play therapy. This was before I knew the right thing to say.
Yeah, yeah.
But I said when I was, 24, however old I was, I said, you know that I should send you to the principal's office for that. And they wouldn't look at me and they just nodded their head. And I said, but I know that you actually don't want to go to the principal's office. And I know that you can choose to behave differently. So you can stay. And I watched the transformation like that. Amazing. The rest of the day, they were the most obedient, kind, respectful, loving, helpful children. And I was like, they need someone to see them through a different lens. Absolutely. They need someone to see them from a different perspective. And if you have a self-fulfilling prophecy that I believe in your goodness, I believe in your capacity to be obedient, I believe in your capacity to comply with limits, all of a sudden they can transform. And that with the play therapy at the same time in my life, I've just been all in on play therapy ever since.
Oh, understandably so. And what an inspiring story. That's amazing. And to really have a front row seat as a substitute teacher, parachuting into a system that is, how awful, but like actively harming these kids, and to have this moment, this one point where you see the opportunity, the potential that one person, like one safe relationship can have on a kid's self-concept, the way they think, feel, behave, and potentially the trajectory of their entire life. Yeah. And then to combine that with the power of play therapy, evidence-based play therapy, which we're going to talk more about, as the vehicle for making that happen, I can totally understand why you are, we're like, and this is what I'm doing with the rest of my life. Yeah. Yes. Got it. What a cool story. Well, and what an inspiring message. And I mean, just to like stop right there, because, in this episode, we're going to be doing a deeper dive into evidence-based play therapy as a career path, as a niche, what it is, how it works. But before we make that pivot, what a powerful piece of encouragement for every therapist listening to this to be tapping into yourself in your world, thinking about what you're exposed to, what makes you feel excited, what lights you up, where do you see potential opportunity that you're just like, feeling that passion because that is the thing for you
Right.
potentially, and to explore that and be open to it. Again, I think so many therapists just get in these situations where they kind of have to do everything in an agency or whatever, and they don't really have the chance to check in with themselves and do that exploratory process. And yours, like there was a lot of fate happening there was a universe blowing things your way. But I think all therapists deserve to have what you have, Brenna.
Well, I do too. And I think, this month in the collective, it's an online community I have for child-centered play therapists.
Yay.
This month, the theme is congruence. And
Mm.
we've been talking so much about that. And all I'm hearing woven through what you just said is we need to be congruent as therapists. And not just because Rogers said it's one of the 3 core conditions. It's because if we are incongruent with ourselves, we can't be congruent with our clients. We can't honor the congruence that has to take place
Mm.
within those therapeutic relationships. If we're working with someone and we don't really fully resonate with the model, if we're working with someone and we don't really resonate with the issue, if we don't get excited every single day about the gift that we are given, that we get to go and help people for a living, there's an incongruence factor there, and we need to figure out what that is. And we need to become more congruent so that we can be at our best.
Yeah. Ugh, words of wisdom. Well, and I want to talk more about what you are doing to train, educate, and support therapists who are devoting their career paths into play therapy for sure. But first of all, okay. So take us into this, not just play therapy. I mean, that's very monolithic, but you, after deciding that play therapy was something you wanted to do, actually came across and developed abilities in a very specific model of play therapy that I know you feel really good about because there's so much research, there's so much history behind it, and it's called child-centered play therapy. Can you tell us a little bit more about just what this is, maybe for our listeners who haven't been exposed to this yet?
Sure. I love to. So let's start with Rogers. Okay. So
Okay.
we go all the way back to Rogers. We go to person centered, and the premise that within a relationship, it allows for change. And the 3 core conditions that the therapist has to make sure are evident. Now, all of a sudden, we have self-actualization, fancy word for becoming a better version of yourself. So we look at Rogers' work, which has influenced almost every theoretical model since. Even if there's been deviations in the approach, we still look back to Rogers almost across the board as one of the most influential theorists that have ever influenced the psychology field. So Rogers' fingers are in everything. But we look at Rogers' work. Virginia Axline came along and took Rogers' work and created 8 principles that honored what he put out, but made it applicable for working with children.
Mm-hmm.
So from Rogers to Axline, and then from Axline to Landreth. So Gary Landreth out of UNT really was the pioneer of making this accessible for students. And so UNT started teaching a lot of students, and now there are other universities that have specialized in play therapy and their programs. But essentially, the child-centered model looks at Rogers' approach, makes it age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate for children, and says that if we provide the be with attitudes to children, which are I'm here, I hear you, I understand, I care, and I delight in you. We use 3 reflective responses. We reflect feelings, we reflect content, we track behavior. We use the 4 pillars. We esteem build using encouragement. We provide limits, set limits appropriately. We provide choices, and we reflect children's feelings. Through these tenets, and there's all kinds of philosophical undergirding. So there's all kinds of rules of thumb that we're to keep in mind. So if a child is drowning, it's not the time to teach them to swim. If you can't say it in 10 words or less, don't say it. Focus on the relationship, not the problem. So there's all of this framework that Landreth created for us, tied directly back to Roger's work. And the idea is that we believe that children will naturally become a better version of themselves if the environment and the relationship allow for it. So we really are very closely tied to the person-centered approach, theoretically, but it has been modified to be age appropriate for kids 3 to 12 as a sweet spot, 2 to 14 as a little bit of modification based. And the goal is to meet children where they are, which is they're not rational, they don't have abstract reasoning, they don't have the cognitive ability to process things, they're not going to intellectually internalize what's going on. So we cannot approach them from an adult wired cognitive fashion because they cannot meet us where we are. We have to go to them. Yeah. And this is about honoring a child's desire to become a better version of themselves. Because if we have an agenda, if we have directives, if we force the pace, if we push children in a direction, if we give them a worksheet, if we give them an activity, if we tell them they need to make this craft to learn about their feelings, now all of a sudden we're in the driver's seat and we are constructing their healing, and that's a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Because if we only look at aggressive behavior, for example, the reason why a parent reaches out is because the child is aggressive. Okay, if we want to do an activity to deal with using gentle hands, I say that somewhat sarcastically because I think all of it is nuts. But anyway, so we're going to use gentle hands. So we're going to do this activity about using gentle hands, and hands are for loving, not for hurting, whatever. I don't even know the stuff that comes out. But the point is, now all of a sudden, in that very one isolated moment, in that very one isolated activity, a child has this sort of concept, even though they're not even cognitive, about what you're supposed to do with your hands. But the next time they're around all of their peers on the playground and someone rips a ball out of their hand and they're angry, and the only way they know, because they have no self-control, they have no regulation, they have no emotional vocabulary, they're not rational, they're not cognitive, they're not even thinking, they're feeling. So all of this is swirling around in their head. What are they going to do? They're going to hit the kid that took the ball. And then we're going to go, well, that didn't do any good. We need to do another activity with them. No. We need to give them the relationship and the environment to learn what it feels like to develop self-control. We need to help them develop some self-regulation. We need to help them understand emotions better so they can communicate their feelings rather than demonstrate their feelings. So it is an age-appropriate approach to children that are not able to think their way out of their problems, and they're certainly not able to talk about it. So we can't lecture at kids. We can't teach kids. We can't educate kids. There is no amount of talking that is going to change behavior. It is experience that changes behavior.
Right. Wow. I can understand why you have such a powerful connection to this model, and just with so much experience in working with kids and also understanding the landscape, because for a therapist to say, I want to work with children specifically as a niche, then you can go in a lot of different directions. But I think I hear you starting to talk about why you believe that this particular path is so much more powerful as a true agent of not just change, but growth and healing compared to some of the other things that therapists might do that are much more cognitive or skills-based, because you're saying that children are primarily emotional creatures. And so anything you try to change or train rather, or that you are imposing on them from this adult mindset is not really going to create the outcomes that support for developing their own internal strength and abilities would.
Right.
Yeah. Got it. Wow. So, and I don't mean to put you in like a pop quiz kind of situation.
I love pop quizzes. Let's go. I love them. I do them to my podcast audience all the time. I'm like, okay, pop quiz. What are the blah, blah, blah? And then I just assume that they talk back to me. I don't know.
Well, I think you and I are cut from the same cloth because I too am a gold star student. I think you might be as well. I always love tests. I was like,
Likely,
I
yes.
could do this all day. Well, so no, it's not like I'm not seeking like specific answers, but what I am curious to know, and I think that this will benefit our listeners because therapists who are listening to this podcast, I mean, I think that they share our values around evidence-based modalities and things that we can really trust because they care a lot about being of genuine service to their clients. And as you know, psychology is a soft science. I mean, there are a lot of people out there in the world who are very charismatic with strong opinions and great haircuts saying all kinds of things about like the right way to live or the right way to do things. And so I think at the end of the day, what we can really rely on is the evidence. And so can you just share some of the research or outcome studies, or even are there meta-analyses that support the efficacy of this modality of play therapy, perhaps over and above some of the other things that people often try to do with kids in sincere efforts to help them, that would demonstrate the power here? Are there things that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there are two pretty prominent
Mm-hmm.
researchers in the CCPT realm, child centered play therapy.
Yeah.
That's an easy acronym. So Sue Bratton and Dee Ray are the two preeminent researchers of meta-analytic research
Mm.
for CCPT. So I think the most recent one took 60 plus years of research, aggregated it, and
Wow.
essentially what they have found is universally, and I know this seems like, oh, we're just going to, have a blanket response, but this is actually empirically supported and
Mm-hmm.
validated. They have found that almost with any presenting issue, almost with any diagnosis, with any age range, including outside of the sweet spot of 3 to 12, they've tested child-centered play therapy with adults. They've tested it with geriatrics. They've tested it with traumatic brain injury. They've tested it with speech impediments. They've tested it with dementia. They've tested it with Alzheimer's. They have literally done full lifespan research on CCPT. And why is it effective? Because it doesn't require you to have to talk about stuff for it to work. So any age client that is not able or willing to speak, when you're selectively mute, when you have a speech impediment, when you have aphasia or apraxia or whatever it is that's going on across all age range, CCPT is effective. And they have proven it effective with all different races, all different cultures, all different religions, all different scenarios. I mean, even parent scenarios. So CCPT with children who have incarcerated parents, CCPT with someone who has a chronic illness in the family, CCPT, I mean, very specific case studies and tests, and it has been universally found to be effective across the board. Why? And then here's the argument. Everyone hears that and goes, no way. But here's why it works. Because it trusts the client, namely the child most often, but
Mm-hmm.
it trusts the client that they know what they're struggling with, they know what they need to address, and the therapist stays out of the way and gives them the environment and the relationship in which to do their work. So of course it doesn't matter race, religion, culture, background, presenting problem. Why? Because you trust the child is going to do the work that the child needs to do. I don't come at it with my cultural bias. I don't come at
Mm-hmm.
it with my racial bias. I don't come at it with my religious perspective. I just create in the moment what the child
Yeah.
needs to do the work. And my creation is just really staying out of the way and being adherent to the model.
Wow.
So the beauty of CCPT is that it is so universally proven effective.
Mm.
And so it's really hard to find criticism of it once you dive into the literature. People that don't understand CCPT are very critical of it, especially directive play therapists. The accusation we're brought into the fray on all the time is, so you just sit and let kids play. Well, no, we don't just sit and let kids play. That's not even anything to do with what we're doing. But that's always the criticism, because if you're not, quote, doing something, then what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the beauty of CCPT. It's a way of being. You are CCPT. You don't do CCPT.
Mm.
You are. I am CCPT at my core, through and through. Every interaction, every relationship, every moment, it infiltrates every fiber of my being. It is a way of being. I don't walk into a playroom and start doing CCPT.
Mm-hmm.
There's no put on, put off the
Yeah,
therapeutic
yeah.
intervention. It just becomes a part of you. And when it ingrains itself that deeply into who you are, there's no way that you don't see the beauty of just being present. The core conditions, let's go back to Rogers, the be with attitudes, the reflective responses. There's all kinds of therapeutic investment and engagement,
Mm-hmm.
but the child guides and leads and directs, and therefore it is universally effective.
So inspiring. Okay. So in this, and I love the way you said this, I am CCPT. Like there's a experiential like presence here for our listeners. Can you just describe um the the theory of change, because this, I think, is something that is so crucially important for every therapist, no matter what model they are practicing, frankly, to be able to understand and articulate how this works for their own understanding, but also for the purpose of being able to communicate this to their clients, because I think too many therapists don't do that. So, how, and again, not to put you on the spot, but like, how does this magic happen, Dr. Brenna?
It's funny you use that word because it vacillates between magic, pixie dust,
Mm-hmm.
voodoo. You get all kinds of words that
Yeah.
people will
You're
throw
like,
and
and
you're
I
like,
am
oh,
CCPT.
this like play therapy pixie dust that you sprinkle somewhere. It's so funny. So essentially, we go back to the idea that every human being is wired
Mm.
to be self-enhancing, growing, healthy, happy. And sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we are in a dysfunctional pattern of behavior. Sometimes, there's something that's blocking us. And sometimes we need assistance to get ourselves unstuck. Hence, therapy exists. So when we can't unstick ourselves, then sometimes we need someone to come along and show us the way and guide us a little bit. But the premise is that every human being wants to self-actualize. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. Let's think about Maslow. We don't even have to go back to Rogers. We can just think about Maslow. Hierarchy of needs. I want to become the best version of myself that I can be. Top of the pyramid. Why? Because all these other criteria have to be met first.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a later developed thing, but we are all wired to do so. So if that is the case, and we can even trickle that down to children, children know how they struggle, why they struggle. They just don't always know what to do to fix it. So we are essentially thinking about the change agent here is providing kids with the time, the tools, and the opportunity, which often means special relationship, special environment. There is nothing like the relationship that is formed between a child-centered play therapist and a client. Mm. There's no other experience the child has like that. There's nothing like a playroom environment. The toys are selected, not collected. They are very intentional. They all serve a purpose. They're within categories. There's therapeutic intentionality in everything. And what happens is kids will come in and they will figure out how to practice in a safe relationship, safe environment, what they need to eventually extend into other arenas and other environments. If a child gets dysregulated at school, there is no way that their brain can attend to becoming a better version of themselves at school when they're in the midst of their dysfunction. When they're in an emotional upheaval moment, there's no way their brain can attend to choosing to behave differently or respond differently. You want to know where they learn that? In the playroom, because it becomes the practice ground. I have a safe person. I have security in the relationship. I have a predictable environment, and there's no fear of screwing up, and there's no negative ramifications for anything going awry. So with these core conditions, now all of a sudden, I can see what it feels like to choose to comply. and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable and I'm not used to it. And I have to see what I think about it. And I have to see how you react, because if you react, then I know, oh, someone can't handle when I'm obedient. I need to go back to being bad because that's what everyone expects me to be. There's all of this working through that they're doing in the playroom. Often they're getting themselves unstuck. They come in stuck on one side of a pendulum. So they have to get themselves unstuck. And the only way they feel safe to do that is in a CCPT environment with a CCPT therapist. Why? Because they have to be vulnerable. And again, let's talk about the way humans are wired. We all avoid vulnerability at all cost. So what happens? Kid is masking all day, every day. They're angry. I'm air quoting, angry all the time. No, they're not. Anger is the way that they pontificate to mask their vulnerable emotion, which is what they're actually feeling and hiding. If I'm angry, I feel big and powerful. So everyone's just going to think I'm angry and aggressive and mean all the time. What I really am is betrayed. What I really am is disappointed. What I really am is fill in the blank. I'm guilty. I'm ashamed. I'm inadequate. I'm unworthy. I'm unlovable. I'm something. So we have to look at this in terms of this very specific nature of working with kids. They can't think themselves through it. They can't talk themselves through it. So they need to come in, and the change agent is always environment, relationship. They will naturally sort out what they need to do. And the interactions with the therapist, if we fully adhere to the model, which I think we're going to talk about eclecticism at some point, but if we fully adhere to the model, we are never saying anything that is not part of a theoretical framework. And there is intention in every single thing that we say in a playroom. Why? Because it yields outcomes. So if we need a child to develop an emotional vocabulary, we're going to reflect their feelings. If we need a child to develop an increased worldview, then we're going to provide them choices. If we need them to build a sense of self-esteem, we're going to encourage them. So now all of a sudden, there are these ideal scenarios where the child can practice what they need to work on until it feels safe and comfortable. And then out of the blue one day, at school, at home, with siblings, with peers, wherever their struggles are, they're going to feel ready, willing, and able to actually use the new skills that they've been working on, because now all of a sudden it isn't so scary and overwhelming. But you have to have hours and hours and hours of practice before you feel ready to throw that out into the real world.
Yeah. Thank you so much for summarizing this and your ability to articulate how it works and why it works makes a lot of sense to me. But one thing that was coming up while you were talking, and this is just a curiosity question. So, I don't work with kids, but I do work with a lot of couples and certainly with a lot of parents. And I myself am a parent. And one of the things I'm curious to hear your perspective on is that, especially in very recent years, like the last 5 years, 10 years, children are all of a sudden growing up in a different environment in a lot of ways than they have in decades past. And there are many inherently addictive substances, activities. I'm thinking YouTube videos, video games, social media. A lot of the foods that kids eat are different than they were. And I can't tell you how many times, I have experienced this or talking with parents who are just beside themselves because they see their kids getting like kind of taken down the rabbit hole of these addictive processes that these kids don't have a lot of control over. And that when parents try to help their kids by setting limits or, boundaries, it turns into big freakouts and power struggles that end up damaging the relationship and everybody feels bad. And so, just speaking to this very common modern problem, how would this model address that?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. I actually wrote a book about it. So I would argue
I have to read the book. I didn't even know. What's the book called?
Device Detox.
Device Detox. All right, there you go.
So here's the premise of the book. We have no idea until you know. You don't know what you don't know, but once you know, it will horrify you. We
Oh,
have no idea as parents and as therapists and as adults functioning in this generation, raising children, the negative impact that screen time is having on our kids.
mm,
And I liken it in the book to decades ago when the Surgeon General's warning was clearly printed on every cigarette carton,
yeah.
but they started advertising actors smoking and athletes smoking, and they presented it as, quote, the cool thing to do. And everyone ignored the warning that existed because it was presented as universally acceptable and cool. So what's happening is every kid from 1 year old is getting a device put in front of them. It's becoming a digital pacifier. It's becoming a digital babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
And no one knows the science behind what's going on in the video game creation, the social media construction. No one knows until you know. I talk about the science of it all in the book. Here's what's happening. Kids' brains are actively being damaged. There is evidence on scans of brain damage that's taking place when kids are in front of screens.
Right.
And then we wonder why all of the childhood diagnoses are skyrocketing. We wonder why all of the medication is being prescribed to minors at a 3,000 times higher level than it was 10 years ago. We
Oh,
wonder why we have all of these new presenting problems in schools and why everyone's on a 504 and an IEP. And we
mm,
wonder why parents are having such difficulty with kids' behaviors. We have not seemed to connect the dots about how addictive screens are for children and what it is doing to their nervous systems and their brains and everything. So I could go on and on about that, but the
well,
point
that's
is
good though.
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so it's so scary, first of all, but it is so important as clinicians. That should be in your screening. If you're going to work with parents and or children, one of your very first information seeking questions should be, I wonder if you can tell me how many hours per day or per week your child spends on a screen of any kind. Every single moment they are in front of a screen counts. So TV, phone, iPad, laptop, tablet, video game, whatever, you name it, it all counts. And here's the phenomenon. Parents are going to underreport. So whatever they tell you, you need to add like 2 or 3 hours to the total.
Wow.
And what self-reported children are saying, 8 to 18-year-olds that were polled by a recent study. So they took 8 to 18-year-olds and said, how many hours a day are you spending in front of a screen? Self-report, children said 8 hours. That's basically pretty much every waking minute that they're not eating or sleeping.
Yeah.
So the skyrocketing issues that we're having as clinicians and as parents looking at these issues with kids, it is no wonder. And so that's a huge factor. But how does child-centered play therapy understand and navigate that kind of environment and climate?
Right.
Well,
Right.
the beauty of this is that child-centered play therapy helps kids to regulate across the board. They learn emotional regulation, they learn social regulation, they learn mental regulation, they learn relational regulation, you name it, all spectra. Kids are able to better regulate. They
Mm-hmm.
are also better to self-control. So when it is time to get off of a screen, they are actually able to abide by the limit because they have a better sense of obedience and self-control.
Mm-hmm.
Also, child-centered play therapy takes into account bringing parents in as therapeutic alliances. So we spend a lot of time meeting with parents, speaking with parents, sharing tips, sharing strategies, giving them tools they can be using at home. The goal is always the more invested the parent is in the process, the better the outcomes. We know that statistically.
Mm.
So the goal is, yes, work with the child individually, but we navigate what's going on in the culture and in the society by getting parents involved, educating them, equipping them, informing them, and then they become your ally when the child is not with you in the playroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure that through all of those things, children experiencing more self-control, more flexibility to receive and accept limits, perhaps that parents are imposing on them. But I would also imagine part of this byproduct is a strengthened relationship where there's more trust between parent and child, that it becomes easier for parents to set those limits and have them have their kids go be like, yeah, you're right, and go along with us. And it's a collaborative agreement as opposed to a power struggle that damages things. But such an interesting perspective. I'm glad that I asked. I can't wait to read your book, Digital Detox, because this is so real. But also, even just like hearing you speak, Dr. Brenna, I mean, one of the things that I appreciate the most about you is that you are such a authentic subject matter expert. I mean, you really know your stuff. And I think having the opportunity to dive all the way down into this model so that you understand every aspect of it, you become it, in your words, is just such an inspiration, because I think what I often see with therapists, even very experienced therapists, I've experienced this in my own practice, is that without this kind of pillar around which to have this like strength and this confidence and this clarity in what it is that they do, how it is they do it, it becomes stressful for therapists. They begin kind of using a bunch of different eclectic tools and strategies and things from whatever. So like I share your passion. So you're with play therapy. I, believe it or not, am with coaching psychology, using an evidence-based coaching framework and then plugging in that theoretical model of choice into the coaching framework to create change in a non-clinical client population. I love it. It's all I want to talk about, all I want to think about, all I want to do. Like, right? So letting our nerd flag fly. But therapists, I think, who haven't even sometimes had guidance from like a clinical supervisor in getting real clear about one organizing theory of change, I think that they struggle. And I know you're a clinical supervisor. Can you speak to this a little bit and just what you have seen? Or, I mean, are all the clinicians who come to you for education and training and certification in your programs, are they all drinking the Kool-Aid, or is this something that you need to manage?
It's so funny you said that. Someone posted in the collective just recently, the online community that I have, someone posted, jump in and drink the Kool-Aid. You'll love it here. And I was like, whoa, that gives off a cult vibe. We need to be careful.
Okay.
But it's so funny because we all joke that like we've all had some of the CCPT Kool-Aid, so it's fine. Yes. So no one comes to me. No, I don't want to say no one. It's rare if someone comes to me fully versed and knowledgeable and adherent to CCPT.
Oh, well, I mean, they're coming to you to learn, but I mean, yeah.
But it's rare, if ever, that they've been that deep of a dive into CCPT. So here's what I have found. I have therapists that come to me all the time and they are confused. They are frustrated. They are on the edge of burnout. They're disillusioned.
Yeah.
They feel alone. They feel isolated. They feel confused. They question whether what they're doing is even working. Some of them are questioning whether they even want to be therapists anymore because they don't see evidence that what they're doing is serving anyone, including themselves. So you have all of this weight of therapists that they're carrying this junk around. And while I'm very data driven and we should research that, we should study that, we should dig into so I'm very minded that way. But I've made my hypotheses, which I'll keep to myself, but I will say this diplomatically. I don't think our education programs at graduate schools are serving clinicians well, because what they're doing is they're trying to give them a little bit of everything, and then they're graduating and then they're sending them out. And then all anyone has ever known is a little bit of everything. Well, okay, exposure is helpful and you have to be able to know what's out there before you can kind of find your lane. I get the premise, but the problem is therapists go out into the world and they've been, quote, trained eclectics. So then they become eclectic therapists. And here's what happens. They try to be all things to all people. Right. They try to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Go on Psychology Today and look at a profile. Look at 10 of them, just to really give yourself a little giggle. Go to 10 Psychology Today profiles and look at what they've selected as their, quote, areas of specialty.
All 70 of them?
I was going to say 42, but okay,
Oh, okay.
70, yes. So you have a list of 70 specialties,
Right.
and you work with all populations, all ages, all presenting problems, all diagnoses. Okay, let's just be logical for a second. We don't even need to talk about the clinical implications of that. Let's just use our brains. Like, we're free to use our brains as clinicians, right? So let's just use our brains for a second. Does that even make an ounce of sense to you? If you were going to go to a doctor and the doctor said, I treat, and they have 97 things that they address, and it's all over the body, all systems, all functions, all cellular levels, whatever, would you not go, what? Like, there's no way that you can do all of that. Okay. We would run the other way and we would find a specialist, because specialists know their stuff, and specialists specialize, and specialists are exclusive, and specialists are highly trained. Yeah. So we have this connotation for, you want someone that knows one thing and knows it well in all of these other industries and all of these other facets of life. But for some reason, we get caught up in this, I need to be all things to all people clinically. And all that does is make you frustrated. It makes your clients frustrated. And I would argue it undermines the very trust that you are trying to build. Because if your client does not know who you are, and if your client does not know exactly what they're going to get from you, and if you can't effectively communicate and articulate why you're doing what you're doing, theoretically, here's the basis, here's the evidence, here's the support. If you don't have any of that to stand on, which you will not, unequivocally you will not, if you're doing 18 different models with 76 different populations, you can't speak to any of them intelligently. And then your client goes, well, who are you? And therefore, how can you help me? And what are we going to be doing together? And how am I going to get better? And all it does is create burnout and confusion. So I argue, my phrase, I say it all the time, eclecticism is the death of our profession. And if you claim to be eclectic, instead of taking this as a guilt trip and a blame game, I hope that it inspires you to say, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And here's where I think this all circles back to. Clinicians tend to be martyr-minded. So we tend to suffer, and we don't even realize that we're suffering. We certainly don't solve the problem. We don't really seek help to work on the problem. We'll just martyrdom ourselves until we're done for, and then we're no good to anyone, including ourselves. So with this martyr mentality that I have noticed in clinicians, we continue to suffer under the choice of eclecticism, and we don't even realize that that's at the root of it. And the burden and the pressure that we feel when it is all on our shoulders to come up with what intervention we're going to use with what client on what day because of what presenting problem from what theoretical model, I would want to bang my head into a wall if every single hour of my day, when I had a new patient or client walking into my door, if every single moment I was going, oh, okay, well, this one's dealing with anxiety, so I better come up with an activity that's going to blah, 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 and maybe we'll do CBT today, and maybe, okay, whoa, that is way too much to manage with a caseload.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you do one thing, I'm CCPT. I don't do it, I am. I am CCPT. I never spend one iota of my time wondering what I'm going to do when my kid walks into the playroom. I never spend one moment preparing to talk to a parent and what I'm going to say and what I'm going to articulate and how I need to communicate something, because it's all I do all day, every day. When you are adherent and when you have one theoretical orientation and you master it, not only can you make more money, let's talk about that.
Huge.
Let's talk about that elephant in the room that no one ever wants to talk about. You can specialize and make more money when you specialize. So let's just be really clear on that. But think about the freedom that we have as clinicians to not be stuck in martyr mindset where we're going to say, I'm going to be all in on whatever it is. Now, if you're going to work with kids, please just explore CCPT and then decide if that's the right fit for you. It's not the right fit for everybody, but it is the most effective way to work with kids. But if you're an adult clinician, if you're all in CBT, be all in. If you're all in EMDR, be all in. If you're all in trauma focused, be all in. There's a very fine line of this is what I do and this is who I am.
Mm.
And when you are all in, people know what they are expecting from you. You know what you're expecting from yourself, and there's freedom for everybody. And the burden is released. I have all of these walking around with these heavy chains and balls wrapped around them. And then when they go, you know what? I'm going to be fully adherent. I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to do it well. And I'm going to pour all my time and energy into mastering this one model. They come back out from under the dark cloud. It's like, I'm invigorated. I have passion. I have excitement. I know what I'm doing. I can trust the process. I can get excited about this again. This is what we need to do as clinicians. We can't walk around and be miserable all day, every day. We give out of the overflow, not the absence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we fill ourselves up by choosing what we want to do, being all in,
Mm-hmm.
and then that best supports us because that's self-care, but it also best supports our clients.
Oh, so beautifully said, all of it. And to have it be congruent, to have it be something that you're so excited and passionate about. I mean, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, it's just so interesting. Like as you were talking, I was thinking a little bit, I have the opportunity to talk to some very interesting people just on this podcast. And I recently talked to a psychologist like us who had, gone down a different pathway and experienced terrible burnout in her own career, and has actually found a professional niche around helping therapists who are so burned out, they do not want to do this anymore. They want to exit the profession and like making meaning of that. And how do I do something different with my life? Like that is what she does now. Because no, but I'm just so happy that you're talking about this, because certainly there is a time and a place, and it is okay if you get to a place and you can't, it is not sustainable. It is not congruent anymore. If you discover that, like, Godspeed, go into HR, right? Nobody's going to be mad at you. But what you're talking about, like, there are so many therapists who are struggling and in so much pain, and the world needs you, right? I mean, that is just objectively true, that the world needs us. And what you're offering, Brenna, is this really inspiring path to create that clarity for yourself and commit to a thing that you can organize yourself around for the benefit of your clients, but also for the benefit of yourself. It's not just a way to, have a stronger private practice and earn more money, but to really like be okay for the long haul in this profession.
Right.
I think that therapists need to hear that message, and just thank you for articulating it so beautifully. Gorgeous.
Yeah, I care so deeply. I mean, I have so many clinicians that email me, text me, show up in the collective, coach with me, and it's written all over them. They are so deflated and defeated, and they've just all but given up. And I just keep thinking, why do we think this is okay? And why is someone not talking about this? Why are we not addressing this in grad school? Why are we not putting things in place so that we can effectively take care of this stuff? And I really do think that I've watched it happen when people find who they are meant to be clinically, and they just adhere to the path. They're fulfilled, and they're filled, and they're happy, and they're competent, and they're confident, and everything we want to be as therapists and clinicians. That's what I see unfold. So I know that it works, but I know sometimes that's a really huge shift.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about it, Brenna, me and you right here.
It starts here.
Change. Oh my gosh. Well, hey, this has been such an amazing conversation, and I know that we're about out of time here. So briefly, for clinicians who are hearing about this, learning about CCPT, and who think that perhaps their life's mission, their professional mission could be related to working with kids, how could they learn more about you and what you're up to and your programs and solutions?
Awesome. So if you are thinking about working with kids, talk to me. So that's the start. Come talk to me. You'll drink the Kool-Aid and we'll be good.
That's right.
Okay. So you can reach me at Brenna at thekidcounselor.com. So that comes directly to me. I don't have anyone filtering my emails. I will get it and respond. I promise. Sometimes it takes a while, but I promise I will. And then I have a clinical podcast. So for clinicians who are specializing in working with children and they want to be child-centered, it is Play Therapy Podcast.
Okay.
And this is basically a seminal training podcast starting at episode 1. You should listen chronologically. So do not start with the current episode, go back to episode 1 and listen to them in order. It basically starts you at ground zero, history, development, and then a seminal masterclass in all things child-centered play therapy. So that will at least give you backstory and understanding of the model. And if that invigorates you and excites you and makes you passionate, then there are some other ways to connect with me. So I have a community that is an online CCPT hub internationally. That is CCPT Collective. So Child-Centered Play Therapy Collective.com. And this is a community of CCPTs all over the world. We talk about cases, we support each other, we have live Zoom calls each week, and it just really has become that place where you kind of feel supported and encouraged and with like-minded people that get it. Yeah. And often, I joke all the time, if you want to work with kids, it's isolating and lonely because most therapists don't want to. Then if you want to be a play therapist, it's even lonelier. And then if you want to be a child-centered play therapist, it's the loneliest of them all because, quote, you're not doing anything, you're just playing. And so we often have this sense of, we have no supervisors to supervise us. We have no one that understands what we do. We have no one that supports us. We have no one that gets us. And this has become the antidote to that. So an international community of CCPTs, and that has just become a wealth of support and encouragement. And then I also offer coaching. So I have several coaching programs, and that you can find more about that at playtherapypro.com. And there are several options there, and you can coach, and then I can directly train you in the child-centered approach.
Amazing. So many resources. And I will be sure to link to all of these in the article that will go along with this podcast episode that you guys have easy access. If anybody's like frantically trying to write these things down, you can find them. Brenna, what a joy to hang out with you today. This has been such a wonderful conversation and so inspiring. Truly.
It's been so fun. And I mean, from the first moment that we talked, we just, we feel kindred spirits with each other. So yes, I really think that there is a subpopulation of clinicians that actually are very attuned to the things that we're talking about. And I think that is growing. And I kind of sense this wave kind of coming out where now all of a sudden we have people that really want to be professional, really want to be at the top of their game, the upper echelon of the clinicians. They want to specialize. They want to have a niche. That there's all of this shift that I see taking place. And that's so encouraging to me. And so it's fun for you and I to kind of process that together.
It's been a delight. And I hope that everything you say comes to fruition. So thank you again so much for doing this with me. And hopefully we'll hang out again soon.
I hope so. That would be awesome. Thanks, Lisa.